Have you heard about rent control? Do you have questions about rent-controlled housing? If so, listen up because we've got some answers about rent control laws. I'm Nicole from Low Income Relief, where we help millions of people save money and get free stuff. A few weeks ago, Robert asked us a great question about fair market rent and how much landlords can charge. That's a difficult and honestly kind of depressing question, but we have answers for you today. Right now, landlords in most areas of the United States can charge whatever they want for rent. There are a few exceptions, but for the most part, landlords are free to set the rent to whatever people are willing to pay. I have seen rents soar over the last year as more jobs have moved online and higher earning households were suddenly untethered and able to move anywhere. In the area where we are currently trying to find a rental, the monthly rent has increased by 50% or more in the last 2 years, and many people are being priced out of their homes. It's definitely heartbreaking for those that are affected. To combat this problem, many states are evaluating some form of rent control. As of the creation of this video, rent control only exists in 5 US states and Washington, D.C. We'll talk more about those rent control policies in a minute. But before we get into those specific rent control laws, I want to revisit Robert's original question. He asked about fair market rent, and that's actually the term used by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. And this is where things get really complicated and kind of depressing. Fair market rents are used to determine the payment amounts for the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. HUD calculates what it considers fair market rent based on a 5-year survey, a recent mover adjustment factor, and other things. However, I found other websites that state that the fair market rent is usually 40% of regular rent in an area, based on recent move-ins and excluding recently built properties. There is a big difference between fair market rent and current market rent. Fair market rent is based on HUD calculations, but current market rent reflects whatever the market will bear. If people are willing to pay more than the fair market rate, the current market rate can soar far beyond the fair market rent rate. And like I said earlier, in most areas of the United States, landlords are free to set the rent as high as they want. This is one reason why some areas have turned to rent control. There are many different forms of rent control, but at its core, these policies refer to an ordinance, statute, or law that limits the amount that landlords can charge for rent. It is what it sounds like, a law that creates control over rent prices. However, rent control laws can differ widely from area to area. Some simply limit how often the rent can increase, or by what percentage it can increase. Other areas may take a more aggressive approach and enact rules that govern rent amounts, mandate arbitration, and limit causes for eviction. It all depends on what your local government has implemented. As of the creation of this video, the United States has 6 areas that have enacted some form of rent control. These include the District of Columbia, the states of Oregon and New York, and certain areas within New Jersey, Maryland, and California. In the District of Columbia, rent control was established with the Rental Housing Act of 1985. This act is fairly aggressive. Landlords of units covered by the act must follow several rules regarding rent increases. These rules state that rent can only be raised once per year. Most of the time, rent can only increase 2% plus the amount of increase in the Consumer Price Index. Elderly and disabled tenants cannot have their rent raised by more than 5% per year. The rent stabilization portion of this act applies to all non-exempt units, but the eviction protection applies to all rental units in DC. In 2019, Oregon became the first state to impose a statewide rent control policy. This law caps rent increases at 7% plus inflation within any 12-month period. Every September, state economists calculate the rent increase cap for the following calendar year. This policy does not apply to buildings that are less than 15 years old or to government-subsidized rental units. In the state of New York, rent control exists in New York City and certain parts of other counties. This control is limited to residential buildings built before February 1947, in which the tenant or the tenant's lawful successor has been living there continuously Since July 1st, 1971, each property covered by this rent control is assigned a maximum base rent that is adjusted once every 2 years to reflect changes in operating costs. When the tenant or the tenant's successor moves, the property is moved from rent control, and the property becomes either rent stabilized or unregulated. Rent stabilization covers a different set of buildings. These properties have assigned maximum rates for rent increases. Tenants in rent stabilized apartments cannot be evicted except for grounds allowed by the law. In New Jersey, more than 100 cities and townships have passed rent control ordinances. Each one is a little different, so that's a lot of information to track. So if you're looking for information on this, I highly recommend that you contact your local city or township hall for more information. In Maryland, several counties and cities have enacted rent control rules. According to landlord.com, rent control exists in College Park, Frederick County, Tacoma Park, and Washington County. For example, Tacoma Park limits rent increases to 1 annual increase equal to the amount of increase in the Consumer Price Index for the Washington-Baltimore region. In California, Governor Newsom approved a statewide rent control law on January 1st, 2021. This law restricts most rent increases to no more than 5% per year, plus the price of inflation is determined by the Consumer Price Index. However, this law also states that local areas can enact stricter rent control laws if they want to. There are many areas that are covered by some form of rent control. These include communities like Berkeley, Beverly Hills, East Palo Alto, Hayward, Los Angeles, Los Gatos, Oakland, Palm Springs, San Francisco, San Jose, Santa Monica, West Hollywood, Campbell, Fremont, Gardner, Glendale, Pasadena, San Diego, and San Leandro. For the rules in those communities, please visit lowincomerelief.com/rent-control-laws. As always, subscribe to our channel for more ways to save money and get free stuff.